And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. And worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water."
Welcome to Mission 66, a TWR ministry. John Matthews and Esther Sisulu are in the Apostle John's revelation to the church. Want to go deeper? Download the free study guide at mission66.org. As we begin, ask God to open your heart to His Word. Now, here's Esther to get us started.
It's time to embark on our series of studies in the Bible, chapter by chapter, with our teacher, John Matthews. Well, today we are in the last book of the New Testament, and we'll be focusing on chapter 14 of Revelation. Now, opportunity is like the dinner bell. If you wait too long, you might just miss your dinner. And we have been given every opportunity to learn of Christ and to invest our lives for Him. But we have to come to Him when we are called, or we may miss heaven. Well, John is here with us with the theme, Time's Up.
Esther, thank you so much. And as always, so good to be with you for this latest episode of Mission 66. What a gift to have the gift of the book of life that has this potential and this power to transform us from the inside out. If you're joining us for the first time, you are so welcome. If you've been with us for many weeks, then you are equally so welcome. We're in the final book of the Bible, Revelation. And this book is a vision that is given by God to the Apostle John whilst he was in exile on the Greek island of Patmos. This was back in the 1st century. Now, in our last episode, we were seeing the end time judgments and the Great Tribulation. And we saw in chapter 7 how God will anoint 144,000 witnesses from among the 12 tribes of Israel to represent Him and carry His message in the end time. And then we looked at chapter 13, where the theme was the mark of the beast, 666. And now, in chapter 14 of this book, we're going to see more about that 144,000, which we read about back in chapter 7. So let's read, starting in verse 1. "Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads." Now, Mount Zion always means Jerusalem, and the Lamb of God always refers to Jesus Christ. So here he is in Jerusalem with 144,000 who had the mark of God on their foreheads, as opposed to the Antichrist marking all his people on their foreheads with the numbers 666. Let's go on to verse 2. "And I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters and like the sound of loud thunder. And the voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they were singing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and before the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as firstfruits for God and the Lamb, and in their mouths no lies were found, for they are blameless." So now we understand that the 144,000 were specially selected as firstfruits from all mankind. Now, a farmer will know that the firstfruits of a harvest usually mean the first crop that is ripe enough to pick. and that a much greater harvest will follow. And so this 144,000 is only the beginning of a great worldwide harvest of souls, which will be saved by God even in troubled times. And the harps and the singing of new songs, well, boy, they're going to make some kind of concert, aren't they? Beautiful music has been written and performed on earth, as well we know, but just wait until you hear the songs of heaven. I can confidently say, Esther, we have heard nothing yet. Let's go on to verse 6. Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water." In other words, time is up. God's kingdom is rising, and the evil kingdom with its lies and falsehoods is about to come crashing down. Watch this in verse 8. Another angel, a second, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality." And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. So, boy, the worshippers of the beast and the ones who get the mark of the beast just so they can buy and sell, well, they'll have a kind of false peace, similar to the false peace that people experience when they cast off restraint and they plunge into a life of sin. They experience an elation, a period of seeming freedom and liberation and happiness. But the kickback is hard. The kickback robs us of peace. It says here, their destruction will be terrible, and there will be no rest. And verse 12 goes on to say, "Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, 'Write this. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labours, for their deeds follow them.' And then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud one like a son of man, with a golden crown on his head, and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, saying, 'Put in your sickle, and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe.' So he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped." What this means is that God has given the people of earth plenty of time to decide who they're going to serve. But there is coming a time known only to God when he says, enough. This is the time that was talked about by John the Baptist in the gospel accounts, that God would make a clean end to the harvest, gathering all the good wheat into his barn, but burning up the chaff with unquenchable fire. And the good wheat represents his faithful ones, those who believe in him. Verse 17. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has authority over the fire, and he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, "Put in your sickle, and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia.
This is the program Mission 66, and we're going through the Bible chapter by chapter, and we're seeking a basic understanding of it, especially for those who have never read the Bible before or perhaps have had limited contact with it. We're looking at Revelation 14 today, and we're studying this vision given to the Apostle John about what was going to happen at the end when time is up. And John, this chapter began talking about that notable 144,000 who were especially selected by God to be his representatives from the 12 tribes of Israel. And it says that they've not defiled themselves with women, but are virgins. So, does this mean that celibacy earns us more favor with God than, say, marriage?
No, this is not in praise of virginity or a promotion of celibacy. It only means, Esther, that these 144,000 men would not have been contaminated with any of the immorality or wickedness that would abound during the rule of the Antichrist and his evil system. So just as in, what's the example? The book of Daniel, when Daniel and his 3 friends were taken captive to Babylon, they were given favourable status by the king, and they resolved, didn't they, not to defile themselves with King Nebuchadnezzar's wine and the meat that was offered to idols. Well, it's a comparable idea here, where John makes a point of saying that there was no way that there would be any taint of impurity in these men at all. And these were also a representative number called the first fruits, which refers to the first crops of a harvest. So these 144,000 were the first of a multitude of people from all tribes, tongues, and nations, men, women, and children, who will be in heaven one day by God's grace and will be with the Lamb of God, Jesus, wherever he is.
Oh, yeah. And, we also see that this 144,000 were a group of special people because they were apparently the ones who would learn the new song before the throne. I mean, what a privilege that is.
Yeah, that's right. And I think this is the only chapter in the Bible where it refers to people in heaven playing harps. Now, we know that David played some kind of musical instrument, but perhaps this is where the cartoonists get the idea that heavenly beings sit around on clouds all day playing harps. Well, look, heaven is not going to be a boring place, Esther. Heaven is a place where all joys are realized, and the variety, the life, the joy will be beyond our imagination, so far beyond our imaginations, and there will certainly be music. And if you think music on earth is good to listen to, just wait.
You know, John, the Bible also tells us about the three angels who fly overhead. The first one bringing the eternal gospel to those who dwell on the earth. And I was just thinking to myself, why God doesn't just use angels to evangelize the world? I mean, certainly it would be, I guess, more effective than trusting us imperfect men to get the job done.
Yeah, it's a good question, Esther. You know, up until this point in Revelation, God had entrusted world evangelism to the church. He's given us the task of reaching every tribe, tongue, and nation with his saving message. And what an honor to be entrusted with such a sober and eternally vital task. But let's be honest, in more than 2,000 years of church history, well, I'm not sure we've done such a great job of it, even though we have made great efforts towards it, but we simply have not been able to reach everybody. Perhaps, Esther, we are missing the urgency of this most important story of all time. Think of it. When a Christian pastor falls into sin, it seems that the whole world knows about it within hours. But 2,000 years after the Son of the Creator God came and died on the cross for sinners and rose again, well, more than half the world, it seems, right now has not heard about him. In fact, it is said that more people on planet Earth today have never heard the name Jesus than ever before in history. What a thought that is. Goodness. Maybe we need to ask God to heal our waywardness and fill us with transforming courage, conviction, and strength, so that God will use mankind when and where possible. But when human effort fails, well, look, he is capable of using other means. And this angel flying in midair will, it seems, be humanity's last chance to receive this eternal gospel.
Okay, well, that was the first angel, and now we see the second angel, which announces the fall of Babylon. Now, what is the Babylon the Great that is mentioned in verse 8? I mean, is Babylon someplace in modern-day Iraq? Can we identify it right now?
Yeah, we can, because Babylon in the Bible was a real historic place. And you're right, Esther, you know, it's where the Tigris and the Euphrates River are close together. And it was the first real huge kingdom. But Babylon is also a word that is symbolic of the entire anti-God system, started thousands of years ago by a man called Nimrod. Nimrod was this great hunter of souls, and he began a false religion filled with witchcraft and idolatry and abominations. And so the name Babylon is not always to be literally interpreted, because it has also come to be symbolic of old Nimrod's anti-God system that fills our earth.
John, what do you think? Do you think that at some point Babylon will rise again?
Yeah, well, you know, there remains, doesn't there, Esther, a worldwide demonic conspiracy to do away with Jesus and his church. And yeah, it's the remnants of the Babylonian system. But for a moment, let's go back to the beginnings, because you see, long ago, the people of Judah were taken into captivity by the Babylonians, and this was God's form of discipline. In doing this, he was saying to disobedient Judah, "You people love idolatry so much. Let me show you some idolatry." So he gave them over to the Babylonians. So he had them then taken captive to Babylon, and Babylon was overrun everywhere with idols. Now, one of the Judeans taken captive was this young man who was called Daniel. And Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, well, they were among the captives who were taken into the service of King Nebuchadnezzar. And as it happened, this great king, Nebuchadnezzar, has a dream. And the only person who could be found in the entire kingdom who could interpret this dream was Daniel, because God gave him the interpretation. And the dream was of a giant statue composed of different materials, which represented 4 great world empires that were going to arise. So you had the head of gold, which represented Babylon. The chest and the arms of this great statue were made of silver, representing the Medes and the Persians, which became the second great world empire. Then you have the waist and the thighs of this statue were made of bronze, representing Greece. And then the legs of iron, well, they represented the Roman Empire. And the feet, well, they were composed of a mixture of iron and clay, which would be very unstable. Similar, perhaps, to what we see in our world today. Governments are unstable, and people are often all concerned with what they can get, turning their back on important historical values of civilization, ignoring the Bible, ignoring Jesus, and following humanism. And so God has allowed this system to go just so far. But one day, this system is going to fall in a cataclysmic destruction, and it's going to be quick. Because God doesn't need too much time to destroy anything once he decides time's up. So, Esther, I guess the point is we need to be sure that we are on God's side. And we do that by accepting Jesus Christ. Accepting Jesus, what does that involve? Well, it involves turning to God and turning away from Babylonian idolatry or any corrupt, perverted, egocentric, anti-God system. It involves us making a turn. And then we have to patiently endure with him, no matter how long it takes. Even if everybody else in the world turns their back on God, we must resolve to remain faithful to him. And Esther, it will be worth the wait.
Oh, John, that honestly deserves a Sailor moment. But I would like for us to just have a quick look at the 3rd angel, which we see announces the curse on everyone who received the mark of the beast.
Yeah, and the mark of the beast, this is not something that you get by chance. It's not an accident. It has to be intentionally imprinted on the forehead or the right hand, and it will be a voluntary act on the part of the recipient to declare themselves in favour of the beast and in full support of the beast's rebellion against God. And that's why the punishment will be so severe. But there is also that call for everybody who would still be on God's side during this time to hang on, to endure to the end. Because again, the reward will be more, so much more worth the struggle.
Absolutely true. Thank you. Thank you for just reminding us of this, John. Now, we see the final harvest, right? And it says, when time is finally up. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, the vision talks in terms of a reaper with this sharp sickle reaping as if the peoples of earth were stalks of wheat or a vineyard of grapes that had ripened. And it's a picture of how the wrath of God will finally come down on the disobedient and sin-filled world. And these grapes, what happens to them? Well, they're thrown into a wine press, which is a large basin where grapes are trampled to make wine. And I believe this is a picture of the coming battle of Armageddon, where the Lord comes in and destroys the enemy with one swipe. of his terrible swift sword. And it says here that their blood will flow up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia, which computes to about 180 to 200 miles. It's a sobering picture, and it's certainly no laughing matter. And anyone who still has sin on their record will be judged and condemned. What do I mean on their record? Well, I mean unconfessed to Jesus, who takes away our sins if we just come to him. And this chapter also talks about the smoke of their torment rising up forever. And that means that hell does not stop. Jesus bids us, he bids you to come to his open and healing arms now.
Well, this sounds very serious, John, and I hope that, dear friend, you will take heed to this call. So how about it? How do we summarize Revelation 14 today?
Yeah, so the theme was time's up. And what we see happening in the world now will not continue forever, because there is coming a time known only to God when the divine scythe or sickle will fall and the earth's harvests is going to be reaped, and the good wheat and the sweet grapes will be taken into God's glorious kingdom. But the weeds and the chaff and the sour grapes will be judged eternally. And that is something that gives us no pleasure to say at all. So we need to come to Jesus and be serious about the warnings that are provided clearly for us here in Revelation, because Jesus is Lord, and God's truth and his will and his moral law will be the only way of life and law that is permitted in heaven.
Well, it is on that sobering note, dear friend, that we thank you for joining us on Mission 66. And as you see, there is so much that we still have to learn from the book of Revelation. So I trust that you will join us same time, same place. Until then, God bless you.
Has God used today's program in your life? Then you'll want to receive the free study guide that's waiting for you on our website. You can get it right away by downloading it at mission66.org. At mission66.org, you can also leave a comment or make a donation to help this listener-supported ministry. When you give, you're helping listeners experience solid Bible teaching in many languages in some of the most spiritually resistant places in the world. Thank you for helping at mission66.org. Mission 66 is a ministry of Transworld Radio.